Yeah, first of all, thanks everyone for having me. I love talking to lugs. I do a lot of conference speaking these days. My time, because of work commitments, is actually kind of thin, so I don't do a lot of speaking like I used to. But I have a special place in my heart for lugs worldwide, because I remember being a young person myself one time, and how much I learned, and how much I got in the early days of the internet, all from local lugs in Los Angeles, where I grew up. So it's always fun. It's always fun to meet new folks. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Rundeck. I have a long background in, I guess I kind of became more well known in the DevOps community. I've done a lot of consulting for large enterprises, both here in the US and in Europe, a little bit in Asia as well. So kind of, really got kind of baptized in the fires of large, operations organizations in, kind of global 500 size companies. And out of that work was born an open source project that became Rundeck. And, Rundeck in a lot of ways has been a Swiss Army knife. It's been used for, many, many things. It's like you can look at like an orchestration or workflow engine, at its core. And from that, we started to see certain patterns of usage, and the people that really got the most excited about it were the people that use Rundeck to really change how they work. And really the community pushed us towards runbook automation and really enabling self-service inside operations organizations, with the main idea being that your time is valuable. Your time is your most valuable thing, right? And the default way of working in operations, the very ticket driven, very siloed, a lot of waiting, a lot of interruptions, there's a lot of friction that bears down on people, makes it hard to do our day-to-day jobs, do the stuff that we both think is interesting, as well as do the things that our companies are paying us to do, move the business forward. Those tend to be often one and the same. So so this presentation is really, it's not really about Linux per se. I think John might have already told you all that. It's really about, how to improve the lives of, the work lives of people, who work in operations, and really focusing on runbook automation. So I've got some slideware, hopefully to kind of, tell a story, talk about the plight of operations, and sort of how we see some of the leading enterprises, the ones that are really spending a lot of money and a lot of time to figuring out, how do we improve our operations. It's kind of tells a story of that and of runbook automation. Then I also have a demo of Rundeck that I can show you as well. So feel free to ask any questions along the way. We're not a huge group, so I think we can go ahead and do that. So let me press present here. So let's talk about the status quo today, right? What we see inside a lot of operations organizations. Life in operations is full of this friction, right? Kind of what you're sort of one or two things tends to be happening, right? Number one, maybe you're being interrupted, right? People are coming to you over and over again for the same things. I need this, I need that. Why is this slow? We need more capacity, less capacity, more storage. I need you to restart this system. Will this work with this? What version's that on? So lots of interruptions, right? And then we finally get back to being able to do our work. Now we're waiting on someone else, right? We need to open a ticket. I don't have access to that environment, or I don't know. I'm working on the app layer, not on the platform layer. Or vice versa. I need a network change, right? So, we're either being interrupted or we're opening up tickets and waiting for someone else. And a large percentage of our time is going to this, and it's neither fulfilling or is it really profitable, right? This is not why people pay us to be constantly interrupted or constantly waiting. They pay us to, help move the business forward, right? Also, we get, personal and professional pride from doing new things and moving the business forward, rather than constantly being interrupted or, waiting for somebody else. And, just want to talk about just for a second, the meta reasons why, we tend to be in this constant state of being interrupted or waiting for somebody else. If you think about how most operations organizations are structured, they tend to be functionally siloed by design, right? We put the network folks with the network folks, the database folks, the database folks, the firewall folks, systems administrators, that's the Linux team, that's the Windows team. We tend to take functional expertise, put like with like, and scale those up. But most work we're trying to do, it's got to span horizontally across those different disciplines. And that's where we're constantly getting those interruptions or waiting for somebody else in a different silo. So we sort of built our world like this. And in a kind of work, that has to pass between those functional specialties, we invented this thing called the ticket system, where, you open up a trouble ticket, or just a ticket now, ServiceNow, Jira, Remedy, whatever it is, and you're waiting for somebody else to do something for you. Or maybe you're on the other side where you're constantly being bombarded with tickets, not to mention the Slack messages and the cube drive-bys. Back the cube drive-bys back when we were in an office, but now it's, I guess, a Slack drive-by. And, in those silos, we built a lot of disconnected tooling and access and knowledge of how to do things. So this is that kind of status quo that, that we're living in. And when I think about the byproducts, right, what's this actually doing to us? Number one, every time we have one of these service requests, right, if somebody wants something done for them, you got two things going on here. Number one, you're introducing waiting, right? Somebody's has to wait on you, right? And that other side of that request is interruption, right? There's interruption being driven into somebody. And not only is that kind of overloading and could lead to burnout and frustration, but it also, it keeps us away from the other work, the stuff that's important, that we should be working on, that we want to be working on, we're getting paid to be working on. We're constantly fielding these repetitive requests, or we're on the other side of this and where the person is constantly frustrated because why does everything take so long? Why is the turnaround time so long in our organization, right? And then also when it comes to incidents, things go wrong, right? That's the other major part of operations. In fact, operations is probably one of the few parts of a business where planned work and unplanned work, the disruption, is actually built in by default, right? We're supposed to balance kind of both acts. But because of these, this constant, this disconnection, incidents take too long and are too disruptive, right? If you think about it, an alert or maybe it's a new tool like PagerDuty or VictorOps or one of these kind of new incident management tools, or there's a ticket like a ServiceNow or a remedy ticket. Someone comes to you and says there's a problem, right? Well, generally, in today's kind of complex, multifaceted environments, we've got kind of one of three options that we can do. Number one, we're either relying on our memory, right, or we're going to go decipher a wiki. There's got to be notes here somewhere. Okay, who wrote this? When did they write this? What are they talking about? Or what they're saying, is this still correct? What's the date on this? So it's a difficult position to be in because you're not sure which is the right information, where you should be looking. Or we've got the second option, right, which is just kind of ad hoc or a tool or script usage. Hey, Jane told me if I look in this directory, there's the network change script to open up a firewall port if I need it in emergency. But is it the right version? Do I have the right parameters? Do I know where to run this thing? Do I know which steps to do it in? That can be a bit of a high wire act and maybe cause more problems than I expected. Or there's a third option, which is by far the most popular option, which is I'm going to escalate, right? Somebody in the company or in my organization knows how to do this. They're a subject matter expert. I'm going to find them and I'm going to grab them and have them help. Of course, this happens across the board. Those people end up being those bottlenecks that are constantly being interrupted. So all of that makes the incident a lot longer, right? Where it's the investigation or doing the dumpster diving through the wikis or whether it's an escalation. And all those escalations are causing extra disruption in the organization. There's this blast radius where a small problem brings more and more people in, and now I'm disrupting all the things that they're working on as well, and that has its own cascading effects. So this question always comes up like, well, okay, so the answer here is to automate your operations. Have you automated your operations? And the answer is invariably, oh yes, we have lots of automation, right? Notice it's not really answering the same question. What they have is they have this sprawl of tools, right? And it's often multiple generations of tools, right? You've got your shell scripts and your PowerShell scripts, maybe mixed environments. You've got your chefs, your puppets, your Ansible, your, you name it, right? Going all the way back to, CF Engine, then it was Puppet, right? Then it was Chef, then it was Ansible. And always one more tool was going to rule all the tools, but the reality is you end up having a whole bunch of those. As well as now you've got this cloud native stuff, right? Kubernetes and whatnot. So you've got APIs and other things you need to hit, and a lot of just good old fashioned, stuff you do on the command line, right? So you've got a lot of this automation. In fact, almost too much, right? But when it comes down to it, you go, well, are your operations really automated, right? And the reality is, if you ask me, well, how'd you diagnose a problem and perform a restart, right? Or how'd you provision, a new load test environment, and like, well, what you would need is that subject matter expert, because they understand the right sequence to do things. They understand where to do it, right? They understand, what the output is coming back. They know how to invoke all those tools. What options do you pass in? Is it -E or is it -I or what's the default value I'm supposed to put in here? And they understand how to process the output coming back, right? when I ran all those things, did I see what I wanted to see? For example, here, a very simple one is in a, kind of a normal enterprise environment. Someone goes, well, is the restart automated? And they're like, oh yeah, the restart's automated. Okay, well, can you hand it off to Jane here, right? It's like, well, not really. Like, well, how do you do it? Well, first I got to go to the monitoring tool. I got to quiet the monitoring. Then I got to go to my load balancer tool, say it's like F5 or something like that. I got to know how to find the right things to drain the traffic off of these particular nodes that I want to do this rolling restart on. Then I need just to know how to check these 2 or 3 things just to make sure that the traffic is actually off of those nodes. And then I can run my trusty restart script. Oh wait, but first I got to go edit the context variables. I got to make sure I run it in the right directory. I got to make sure I have the right host list updated so it knows how to connect to all the right places. And then I got to do it in reverse. Put the traffic back on. I have to know how to check the 5 or 6 things that I check. I look for a log file, I look for a process. Maybe I go and hit a couple URLs to make sure this thing comes back up. And then I turn the monitoring back on, right? If I try to hand that off to somebody, right? Well, now they've got to become experts in all those tools, or power users at least. And so that's a whole kind of training load that I have to take on. So most people that are talking about automation, they've got the tools and the means to move the bits from point A to point B. But what they're lacking is the automation around the knowledge of how to invoke all those right tools at the right time, process the output, and know what happened, right? And the reality is we have plenty of tools at that level. We know how to move the bits. There's going to be a lot more of those tools. It never is the end of the story. We always have one of everything. But the level above that is what operations really is, right? It's knowing how to use the tools, right? Which tools to execute, what order to execute them, how to invoke those tools correctly, what arguments to pass to those tools, how to find the right things to run those tools against, how to evaluate the outcome, know what to do next, how to recover if there's a problem, right? And who to notify if there's a problem, or you're even doing it in the first place. And to us, that is operations, right? And Rundeck and its runbook automation is about automating that level. It's automating the workflow and the knowledge that has to span across all of your tools. So you can encapsulate that, let a larger audience do these procedures, so you can free up your subject matter experts to do what they need to do and not have everybody waiting around for those bottlenecks to do something for them. So I'm just going to kind of pause right there, because I know I've been kind of blasting everybody for a few minutes here. I'm just curious, based on your experiences, how does this sound? Is this are you picking up what I'm putting down, or am I off in the clouds? Just kind of curious what you all think.
The kind of organization you describe sounds astonishingly familiar. I mean, I'm dealing with that right now, notwithstanding where I'm sat. They're a large organization, mostly based in London. They have all of those problems. So I'm very intrigued to see how this develops.
Well, I agree with that as well. We've all seen these problems.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's a people problem, right? It has to do with it's not so much the scale of the environment. Like, oh, we know how to automate 1,000 servers to infinity, 10,000 servers, right? It's kind of a solved problem. The problem is, how do you deal with hundreds or thousands of people? How do you deal with generational, right? That, devs got it easy, right? Devs get to forget about the old and start over fresh with something new, right? I'm simplifying things, right? But operations, you have to take care of all the old and worry about the new, right? So you've got all these generations of legacy environment, the stuff that I call legacy, the stuff that makes you money, right? that you have to take care of, and new things coming down the pipe at time. And the problem is the human to human interaction, right? As in the knowledge transfer among humans is as problematic as dealing with any of the underlying technologies. So, that's really where Rundeck comes in. Rundeck, we say, is automated operations, right? It's that stuff in the blue that you have to encapsulate and be able to formalize. And there's kind of 2 ways that those operations get automated. The one which I want to talk about today, this use case is where everybody kind of starts, is runbook automation, right? How do you encapsulate all that stuff in blue, and how do you turn it into these workflows that other folks can use? The next step, which we see a lot of companies driving towards, is taking that runbook automation and turning it into scheduled or event-driven automation, right? And Rundeck does have that part in it as well. It's got the webhooks, it's got the scheduler infrastructure built into it. But fundamentally, the first idea is encapsulating those things, and then whether or not humans are triggering them, like an Iron Man suit, like, okay, I need to have these things at my fingertips and act, faster and smarter. Or if I've got another tool, right? These new AI ops tools that use different machine learning to spot patterns, and then, can fire off diagnostic or repair actions. We'd still want to do that through the same runbook automation layer. So what is runbook automation, right? So runbook automation is safe self-service access to automated operations capabilities, right? And the way kind of can think of it is, the easy, I'm not sure this is a global thing, but the easy button, Staples, we have an office place here, that office supply warehouse type store that had this this ad campaign about the easy button, right? Which was just this big red button, and you needed something and you hit the easy button, and the Staples person, had it for you, right? And you can think of it like an easy button. You're creating an easy button that anybody in your organization with the right access privileges can use to previously do what your subject matter experts, what only they could do, right? The things you had to escalate to them, how do you encapsulate that knowledge so other people can use it, so they can worry about things that they need to worry about, and the people that need it done don't have to sit in line and wait for that person's that person's time, right? And often it's interesting that waiting and that disruption, it's often expert to expert communication, right? It's not just like your level 1 network operations folks. You want to empower them with the ability to diagnose or take action. Often it's like expert to expert, right? Like, oh, I'm on this systems and I'm on this systems engineering team trying to build out this new environment. Oh, wait a minute, I need something from this the firewall team and the database team, right? And so now I'm waiting on them and I'm interrupting them while they're trying to handle something else. It's often expert to expert communication as much as it is the kind of the less expert, folks, right? So there's kind of 3 quick use cases I'm going to talk about before I'll show you all
I have a quick question, if I may.
Yeah, please.
When you say Rundeck, are we talking about the Linux scripts? Are we talking about some software that was
sorry. Rundeck is a tool, right?
Okay.
So Rundeck is a tool where you define these things. It can run, on Linux, it can run on Windows. It can, it's actually a Java web app. It's agentless. It SSHs out by default. You can use other kinds of transportation protocols, but it's a place where you define, you create these jobs. Jobs have multiple steps, and it has like access control and user input handling and workflow conditionals and error handling, notification, all the stuff that's hard to program, right?
Okay.
Writing a script is easy. Point A to point B is easy. Hit that API is easy. Generate that config file is easy. You've got all the tools to do that and know how to do that. It's how do you turn that into a workflow that you can safely hand off to other people to use or safely call from other tools. That's Rundeck. Rundeck is the software. And there's an open source version and that does pretty much everything I mentioned. And then there's an enterprise version that kind of has a bunch of things on it that enterprises that you care about when you're doing it in an enterprise environment, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Sorry, I should have been a little clearer up up front. So, and runbook automation is just the style of use, right? It's this use case I'm talking about. So, kind of 3 big things: service requests, right? I need something from somebody, right? Incident management and business continuity. Service requests, right? Less waiting, fewer interruptions. Everybody get more done. The idea is, I talked about this earlier. The pain is the slow turnaround time, right? Or in the kind of new lean DevOps language, long lead times, right? That's painful for them. On the other side, there's a counterparty to this transaction. It's painful for them because it disrupts their work, or worse, it disrupts their life, right? Either because they can't get their work done during the daylight hours, or someone needs something, somewhere else, and it's 7 o'clock at night, and you're trying to, have a barbecue or whatever you want to do, right? And also the third one to the organization is cost of delay. All these little requests, all this waiting and interruption just builds up, right? Just death by 1,000 cuts just makes the project schedule slip and makes the organization just kind of, it's the whole everyone looks busy, nothing's getting done problem that if you step back in most complex organizations, you see. You're like, wow, there's so much effort going on here, but it seems like stuff just keeps getting, slipping on the schedule. It's often because all this waiting and interruption just chops down people's time, right? And the other use case, so how you would solve it with runbook automation is take those repetitive requests, go to your ticket system and say, hey, what are the things that people are commonly doing? It's, can you restart this app for me? Can you check the performance of this? Hey, we've got some known issues. This database lock happens. Can you fix that for me? Or, we need this cache cleared, or there's a memory issue. Can you restart this, right? Or often there's things that even aren't emergencies from your perspective, but they are from somebody else's. I call them like last minute business requests. Those are just the same as as being a problem, right? Like, oh, I need you to add this new, in the config file, add this new partner, right? Or maybe you don't have a partner access yet in the application, so we got to manually configure stuff. Or I'm going to need more capacity. Can you add that capacity? All these kind of common requests. You can take those and say, hey, let's just turn those into self-service, use all the features in Rundeck like access control and the user input options. I can show you all this stuff later, but make it easy and safe for them to do self-service themselves. And now the runbook automation becomes self-service for them, and it becomes a protection mechanism for the people that normally get under that deluge of all those repetitive quests. So they're happy because they know nothing's standing in their way. On the other side, subject matter experts are happy because all of that repetitive stuff gets kept off of them, right? But they're still notified. They still know it happened, but they don't have to get involved. So less waiting, faster turnaround times, fewer interruptions. Everybody gets more done, right? And often the frustrating part is, well, a lot of these problems, these requests are just because of access restrictions. Like, I can't let you touch that environment because it has customer data in it, right? I've got 5 people in this big company, and they're the only ones that have been background checked to check that environment that has customer data in it. But you wrote the application, you know most about it, but I can't get you access. So now I'm like looking for log files for you and sending you the wrong log file. We're going back and forth, and I've like, this is my favorite calls of all time. It's like, hello. And they're like, yeah, Acme app, it's, something's wrong with it. Okay. Well, did you try, doing this diagnostic? I did. Okay. Can you tell me what happened? I don't remember. Right. Did it work? No. And you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? Right. So, instead we see is very interesting is people using this runbook automation idea in Rundeck because of the access control in it, and because you're no longer giving people access to that specific, it's not like, hey, here's your SSH key, here's a shell script, do no harm. It's saying, hey, well, here's this runbook that we've created ahead of time. This automated runbook we created ahead of time. Ops and security can look at it and say, yep, this looks good. And now I'm giving this person to that particular action through your runbook automation tool like Rundeck. And then by doing that, security and compliance are okay with that, because they're like, well, you're not directly accessing the environment. Instead, you're accessing this tool that we've pre-vetted. And because you can do things in the source form or in graphical form, it's really easy to do a code review and say, yeah, this all looks good, thumbs up. Now I can let developers do things like run diagnostics, fetch logs, even do restarts or other kind of triage things directly in production environments without breaking all of the compliance and security that we've spent all this time, setting up around it. In fact, compliance and security will often say, hey, that's better, because in the past, the old way was we do this, this theater of this ticket passing, right? We got this nice workflow set up. We've got these approvals in there, and it goes through all of this workflow. And then it comes down for somebody to actually do something, right? And what happens? They go and do something, and they turn around, and they write done. Right. And you're like, what? We just lost total chain of what happened there because, somebody was doing something kind of in an ad hoc manual way and then reporting back versus saying, hey, let's give them this Rundeck job or this runbook, this automated runbook. And now when they run it, we have the history, we know what actually happened. So it closes the loop for security and compliance, which is a huge barrier in big enterprises for changing how people work, right? Because so much of the antibodies, of the protections that have been built up in these organizations is all about, mitigating risk, right? So that was service requests. Another common use case for runbook automation is incident management, right? And similar to we wanted, less waiting and fewer interruptions. This one is shorter incidents, right? And fewer escalations. And we talked about this, right? That this is hey, I get the alert. I got all this monitoring, the AI ops. I got got my new incident management tools, my ticket tools. I've alerted the right person, but now what do they do? How do they take action? Well, with the automated runbooks, they can take action. Okay, here's the diagnostic procedures, right? We've gotten together with all of our experts and we've decided here's the 25 different things we would check to see if this service is healthy at all different levels. The network, the database, the underlying OS, you name it, we can just keep adding to those. And now anybody can run that, right? They have ability to say, hey, there's an alert on this service. Let's run these diagnostics. From those diagnostics, maybe we'll pick a repair action and try to run it. Or we can escalate to somebody and then show them all that and say, hey, I ran all these diagnostics. You can log in, follow the links yourself. And it looks like there's a network problem. You're the network expert. what do you think of this, and go and do something. And, it kind of stops these type of escalation chains, which we see all the time in our consulting. It was like, okay, there's an incident in this Acme app, right? And the level 1 knock says, oh, there's an incident, right? Acme app. Okay, I'm going to call this on-call team for Acme app. And I get them, and, it's an all hands for that team. And then they go, well, this stuff is changing so fast. It looks like there's an app problem here, right? With this actual app code. So they escalate to the on-call developer, right? They finally get involved and they go, well, this looks like a database problem. I'm not getting any data here, right? So then they escalate to the DBAs, and find there's not that many of them, right? It keeps getting longer and longer as you escalate up. And the DBAs go, yeah, of course you're having a data problem. There's a problem between the network, between the database and the app. That's what, talk to the network folks, escalate to the network folks. We're talking hours, right? This could be a couple hours especially if it's not a, like a P1 major outage. To do a quick fix at the network level might have taken us 2 hours to get there in the first place, right? And not only is the incident time taking too long, but we're distracting all those people from work that they have to be doing. One of the insidious things about opening tickets and passing tickets around an organization is it collects names. All these people get added to the ticket. And even if they're not directly on it, it's this context wagon that they're sitting in that's taking a little bit of their brain power and, following it around the organization. So your incident response hours, which I've seen more and more companies becoming very attuned to, those are spiraling out of control, right? Above that level 1 knock person, how much time are we spending, right? As an organization collectively responding to problems. And then of course, there's just a straight up outage time. How long does it cost us for this outage, right? And instead, what if we had, number one, if we had, the diagnostics in place, right? The automated runbook for the diagnostics, and that part of that diagnostics was looking for known issues. And, maybe it's this database log bug, right? Well, we could run that unlock job right away, right? So we're talking from hours, 2 hours, down to a minute, right? To or seconds to fix known issues. So less outage time, fewer incident response hours. Maybe there's more unknown issues, right? Well, maybe the nice thing is that level 1 kind of those diagnostics that I can run automatically through my automated runbooks, I can look at that and say, oh, wait, they're all green, except there's a network problem here, right? Now I can do a pinpoint escalation to the network team. Say, hey, look at this output, network team. Looks like there's a network problem here. What do you think, right? And so that pinpoint escalation dramatically cuts down the time as well. And so, about Rundeck itself is that, Rundeck's not about replacing your favorite automation tools. It's trying to be runbook automation above that layer, right? So if you've got shell scripts, PowerShell scripts, Ansible, Chef, Puppet, whatever you've collected over the years, even manual steps. I just go to the command line and type this in. Rundeck's about creating a workflow that spans those things, knows how to invoke them, knows how to process the output coming back, and help you make better decisions. And also this works across all of your infrastructure, right? If it's, physical machines, bare metal, Kubernetes pods, targeting network devices, it's an agentless system. So it's really about, finding what's out there, and you can define any kind of layer of configuration that you want. But it's not trying to replace those existing tools. It's trying to make them better. It's trying to add value above that. And, case in point, a good example here is one of our most popular integrations is with Ansible, right? So a lot of Ansible users come to us to say, hey, we want Rundeck to be the human to tool layer on top of all of our Ansible scripts. And oh, by the way, we also have a lot of shell scripts and PowerShell and other things around the organization. So, Rundeck helps them elevate it and get the most value out of all those Ansible playbooks that they're creating. And so, you get an alert, Rundeck enables you to take action. You got a ticket, Rundeck enables you to take action. And the last one I'll just kind of speed through quickly is the idea of business continuity, which has really come up a lot in our customer base the last few months, as you can imagine. That the legacy business continuity focused on the things, right? We focus a lot on the information, facilities, the network. The idea was that, hurricanes, snowstorms, cyber attacks, earthquakes, floods, they were all coming for our stuff, for the assets, for our things. And a lot of business continuity was around that, right? How do we get our people and put them up in the conference room or in the hotel across the street so they can, weather out the storm? Or, how do we repair our data from a cyber attack or things like that? Or what happens if we lose a data center or an availability zone? And, so the idea was those are the things to protect, and our hero people, we would throw them at this problem and help them, mobilize to save the broken applications or data or infrastructure, whatever it might be. But something, we've become all too aware the last few months is what happens when your people are disrupted? What happens when they're the ones that aren't available? They can't come to the office. Family members are sick. God forbid, they're sick themselves. When the people who are supposed to handle the disruption are the ones who are disrupted, what happens to our business continuity plans, right? And, in most environments today, our systems can't go without human intervention. John Allspaw, who's a kind of famous researcher in this area, he has this great conference talk where he has everybody in these big enterprises put up their hands like, how many of you think that if today you were locked out of all of your systems, would they still be running in 24 hours, right? In 48 hours, 72 hours, usually somewhere around 72 hours to 5 days, people's hands go down. They're like, yeah, our systems would blow up, right? We need that human intervention. Well, what happens when those people aren't available, right? And, we've got these super complex environments that are constantly changing. So because of that, knowledge is this is all from a much longer presentation, so I'm kind of giving the speed version, but that knowledge is being more and more siloed because, with all these complex platforms and new technologies, things are moving too fast. So we have to have these experts, and the experts are good to have, but that knowledge resides in their head and is increasingly more siloed. So we've accumulated this sprawl of tools, right? From monitoring observability to our scripts and automation, to these new incident management tools, to our classic ticket and ITSM systems. We've created these expert tools, but we still need the experts to operate those tools, right? But in this new world, what happens when those experts aren't available, right? Our operations can grind to a halt, right? So what's really missing is that runbook automation, which is capturing and sharing that expert knowledge as automated runbook. That way, within reason, can operate these systems, can keep these systems going in times when those subject matter experts are unavailable, right? And that's really kind of where Rundeck and business continuity comes in. It's how do you encapsulate that knowledge? So either at a micro level, like, oh, this team is experts, they cannot be bothered to do anything else because they're on this big security problem or triaging this other issue, to where, oh, so-and-so is not available because, their kid got injured or something like that. Or it's just, we had to let go of this entire team, like we're Airbnb, right? Airbnb had to let go of a ton of good people just because, their world collapsed, right? So, how do you encapsulate that knowledge to protect the business, to let it keep operating when those experts are no longer available, either temporarily or permanently? That's where this runbook automation can come in for business continuity. So that's kind of the three places that we see people applying runbook automation. I got a demo for you next, but I'd love to get any comments or take any questions. The folks that thought this seemed familiar, does it still seem familiar, or have I veered off the path and fell into the woods? Charles, I think you're muted.
Yeah, no, I still think it's understand the case. Yeah, good.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good. I'm time check here. Oh, got plenty of time here. So I know you cannot go to a lug and hang your head high without a demo, right? I'll be run out of town. So,
Damon, hi, Steve here. Just before you go on to your demo, I was just thinking that. At what size of organization, in terms, I don't know how you measure it, would Rundeck become, usable in that respect? Because it's obviously, if you're only running a few servers and maybe one or two people, it might help, it might not, I don't know, but where's the sort of like that sort of point of where
yeah, the open source side, it's quite small. So a lot of folks just set it up where it's like, hey, I've only got a few servers, but it comes in handy for them in two ways. One is, if I roll out of bed at 3 a.m, I don't want to have to remember all the things that I figured out last month, right? It's like, oh, I figured something out. And then it's like, oh no, but it's going to happen again in a couple months. It's going to happen at 3 a.m. Am I going to remember that I did this and not did that, right? So, here's my kind of complicated restart thing, or here's some diagnostics checks. Maybe there's like some, I did a little research and I figured out these are the top 20, things like, system commands that I could run to do performance checks, right? Just like network performance checks, right? Instead of having to recall those, you can just set up a workflow in Rundeck to do that for you. It generally, at the small scale, also comes in handy when it's like team-to-team communication. Like, hey, you keep asking me to do the same thing over and over again, right? Maybe it's like, oh, like I've seen, I read one the other day that their first Rundeck situation was they were adding these partner quickly, the company, like 10 a month or something like that. And every time they added a partner, they had to spin up this, in this DMZ zone, this API test environment, right? And they could have that all automated. I think it was like a chef thing to build it, and they could build it. But then it's like, now we got to open a ticket for the network team because they're going to open up the next two ports in the firewall to that DMZ. So, and so that partner can test it, right? So 10 times a month, they're like, hey, network team, open these ports, right? So finally the network team was like, hey, here, Rundeck job, do it yourself. Here's a button. It's going to automatically suggest the next 2 or 3 ports, whatever you need. Do that, run it. It'll send us a little email that you did it. We don't really care. You can't screw it up. And also they set it up so it would, that Rundeck job would call the Rundeck API and create another scheduled job that would run 90 days later that would actually remove those ports, right? So it was a way for them to remind themselves like, oh yeah, let's just, we tell them that the environment's only gonna be there for 60 days. And so let's just leave the ports there for 90 days, or the environment there for 90 days. And then we'll just go and shut down those ports. If anybody complains, then we'll open the ports back up. If not, then we'll know, a week later we can actually remove that environment, right? So, that was only a few handful of people, but it was like this little complicated dance we got to do. So they're just using the open source version for that. One other one was an insurance company that had this complicated underwriting process, and like 5 or 6 underwriters, had to log in through this custom web interface and do their underwriting tasks, right, for these kind of large, complex real estate things. And there was a bug in the system where if somebody didn't press the I'm done button before they got a cup of coffee or shut off their computer or whatever it was, the UI would time out, and now there was a record level database lock on that policy, and no one could get in, right? And invariably, when it got discovered when some fat cat, property owner was on their way to their insurance broker, and the insurance broker couldn't get into the policy, and all hell would break loose. And they would get, this would happen, maybe 15, 20 times a month. They would get these P1 emergency hair on fire, escalations for a DBA just to go in there and run this little SQL script that would unlock that record. And so, that's expensive. And they went all the way to the top of the CIO arguing that ops said, you have a bug, you need to fix this. And the dev side said, no, we got more important things to fix. You have a workaround. And besides, next year, we're going to rewrite this whole system. Now, everybody knows that's never going to happen, right? It's going to be 5 years or more before that. I'm sure that system is probably still there today, and it's, 5 or 6 years later. So all their first Rundeck job was to give the customer service agents, the way Rundeck works, you only see what jobs you have access to. And they gave them run-only access to this one job that said, fill in the policy number and your name. They didn't even use Active Directory or single sign-on integration. They just put this name in. Anybody in our internal network can do this. You put in the policy number, you put in your name, hit the button. It runs a little check to make sure it's locked. Then it runs that unlock script. Then it runs a little check to make sure it's unlocked. It says done, and it sends an email to the DBAs, right? And now they got rid of let's get, 10, 15, 20 of these priority bugs a week. And, that was a very small scale use as well. So there's lots of little things that we find people using Rundeck for, but when it starts to cross organizational boundaries, or it starts to be kind of the thing they depend on, thing you use to fix the things, that's when people start looking at the enterprise. And that's generally, kind of larger scale, right? It's multiple teams, it's, dozens of people, that's kind of where the enterprise starts to catch on, because it becomes more of an enterprise concern.
I mean, I just jumping in slightly. I mean, I can see a use for this in our IT company, and we're like 2 guys. I mean, so something simple like, oh, this is what used to be a OneNote set of notes on how we set up a client machine that might only happen once every 6 months. Whereas in Rundeck, it might well be it's a set of notes, but it's a set of notes that can just be run.
Yeah, and that's actually something that we see consulting companies use Rundeck for, is like the leave behind. Like, hey, here's a custom control panel for you, right? And if you update, and if you tell them, hey, there's a problem, hit this button, right? And then the nice thing is you can log in and see, well, what did you actually, what they actually run? And then when you change that button, it's not like you're giving them a new document. It's like, here, I'm just going to change the button for you, right? So we see that for kind of very common sort of self-service kind of leave behind for, consultancies to do. And again, the open source has the access control. The open source has a lot of the stuff that you would use. The enterprise is things like clustering, high availability. There's some visual tools around the access control. There's a whole webhooks rule processing engines if you want to integrate the other tools and do kind of fancy things. There's advanced scheduling and calendaring for anything beyond beyond like the sort of normal cron style of scheduling. There's health checks. There's different things inside it that really matter if you're going at scale. But the core of it, our deal is, it's the open source, take it, run it, spread it far and wide, and, eventually somebody comes to us and asks for the enterprise. So, all right, let me do a little demo here for you all. So, I don't know how familiar what you guys are with PagerDuty, but it's common integration with us. So this is kind of an incident management scenario. So PagerDuty is an incident management tool. It's really about, you can think of it as a cousin to a ticket tool, right? So, ServiceNow, Remedy, Jira, those are your trouble tickets. But PagerDuty, instead of having a notion of a ticket, it's got a notion of an incident, right? And it's all about saying, hey, there's two parts to it. One is getting all the input to decide if there's an incident. So like your monitoring tools, the new AI ops type capabilities. So PagerDuty is about helping you take those and determine, there's some event here that we need to respond to, and is it high severity, low severity? And then PagerDuty calls an incident, and then PagerDuty knows who to page, right? And it can call your phone, there's a mobile app, but it's really about managing that response in the human-to-human communication and knowing who to escalate to and capturing all the knowledge, right, that goes on during that incident. So it's really your kind of firefighting tool, right? So, how PagerDuty and Rundeck works together is, actually, let me just trigger an incident here. It's a little behind the scenes magic. I'm gonna blow something up. All that talking, not enough demoing. Okay, so let me just actually I'll expand it so you can see what I'm doing here. But I'm just gonna run this quick chaos job to create an alert. Okay, so this is like my behind the scenes. Don't imagine it happened. So I'm over here in PagerDuty. PagerDuty is known, and tells me there's this incident, right? I'm going to click into this incident. It gives me a timeline of what's going on in the incident, and you'll see here it says note added by Rundeck, right? Rundeck running performance checks. I can click in through that, and I can actually see these performance checks being run. Now this is done via an event handler inside PagerDuty that I configured to say, hey, send this webhook to Rundeck if you see a high severity incident for this impacted service, this Zingbats logistics service. And so now when the person logs in, whoever the first responder is, they automatically see, oh, well, this is already running. Rundeck's already gathering this performance information for me, and I can look at the log output, and I can see things in different ways. So in Rundeck, I can look at it from this kind of node-centric point of view, right, where I can see what I ran on each node, right? Or I could look in this log output where it'll collate everything by node and just show me the raw log output. And this one, I'm running a bunch of different steps here. See this red here? Well, this is all actually colorized by Rundeck. You can tell Rundeck to have these kind of output processors to say, hey, if you see this certain pattern of text, you get kind of quite complex with it. I want to colorize it, or you can make it blink or make it bold, or I want to replace it with some kind of big badge. I'll show you those in a minute. But the idea is someone looks and goes, well, hey, there's some red here. I'm reading these things, pretending like I know there's something going on here. Well, now instead of having to go, well, what do I do, right? Well, back in PagerDuty, I've set up, again, scope to this service. They have this idea of a custom action here. And I can say, well, I'm going to run the deeper level diagnostics, right? And so I'll go ahead and do that. It should take a second here for it to just refresh, I guess. Their mobile app is a lot more zippy. So it says, okay, node added by Rundeck. I'm gathering these diagnostics, right? And I click back over to Rundeck, and I'm seeing the diagnostics. Now here, what I've done in this log view is I've actually, instead of showing all the log, all the raw kind of output of these different diagnostic checks, I've told Rundeck, hey, hide that output and just show these process badges. Look for certain patterns in the output and just say, hey, is it green? Is it red? Thumbs up, thumbs down. I can really define what I want these to be. And I'm seeing some red here, right? So there's some issue with this, with this node, this Nginx node, right? Well, again, rather than having to say, oh, I'm going to escalate off to somebody else, I've just told my first responders, hey, look, this is a pretty finicky service. So if you run the diagnostic, you see something that you don't like, I'm going to give you this safe restart. Go ahead and run the restart. For PagerDuty, sends a webhook over to Rundeck. It's going to give me the link in a second here. Let's refresh. Oh, there we go. Of course. The moment I hit refresh, it's already popped up, right? So it tells me it's running the restart. It ran pretty quickly because it's a simple demo here. So it sent a second message saying, hey, the restart's complete. That way, people following along with the incident know that is it going on or is it complete? So I'll just click on it, and again, I see I can look at it from a node centric point of view, right? See what's going on, or I can look at the full log output, right? And you notice that it's showing me the log output, collated by node for each of these commands, and then I'm going to run that diagnostic command over again, right? Now I see, okay, these are all green. Looks like we're good. I can go ahead and close out the incident. But also, what might happen is, well, maybe I do have to escalate, right? I do have to get a subject matter expert involved. Well, first of all, they can come along and look at the activity history and just click in and say, oh, well, what happened here, right? And they can look at this execution. They can see what's going on. They can get the full output if they want. But perhaps they're not going to do something through these custom actions, the simple actions that I've exposed to PagerDuty. They're going to want run some deeper level actions that they've set up in Rundeck. And one might be this bug, right? There's this database lock issue, and so this is a known issue. So I've set up this job in advance, and one of the nice things here, and I can say, well, hey, I want to associate it with this PagerDuty. This incident, right? Incident 161. And maybe I'll say, hey, it's a known issue. I'm trying the lock release job, right? And I can go ahead and run that, and it will give me the output right here in Rundeck. Says it's all good, but also over in PagerDuty, right? It's going to add that to the timeline. So now other people who are involved in the incident, then they log in, they can see what people are running, what they're doing. And for this demo, it's a very simple instance. I've just one role account called admin, but normally you would integrate Rundeck with like your Active Directory or your LDAP or something like that, and log in, authenticate that way. That way it would show your name and that you did something, and so on and so forth. But you can also set up local users in Rundeck as well. You don't have to a directory service or a single sign-on. So that's the general kind of flow of things. What do people do with Rundeck? Well, they got like diagnostic jobs in here, right? I've got a bunch of repair jobs. It's gonna be simple things like, storage utilization, right? Let's set up a job for that, right? And it will go out to all the different nodes, and it'll check the storage for me. And I can do different kind of log output formatters. So maybe it brings us back in in an HTML format, or maybe a JSON format, or some other random format. I can say, hey, I want to put this data into a table, so make it easier for people to see. So imagine people run reports, they do diagnostics, they take repair actions. Often they set up things for people in the organization where, like, maybe we have some business analysts, and they're always asking for stuff like, oh, they forget to upload a spreadsheet for the nightly catalog rebuild, and they come running down the hallway at 9 a.m. saying that the catalog parts catalog is bad, and we've got to drop everything and fix the catalog, right? Well, with Rundeck, why don't we just give them the job to be able to do it themselves, right? And we can set up any number of kind of user inputs here to say, pick which thing you want to fix. Often a lot of tools and things you need, like database passwords or other secrets. You can set up Rundeck so Rundeck has a key store built in, a secret store, and if you want to hide a password, somebody with that super user privilege can put the password into Rundeck. It stays encrypted on the disk. You're given a little token that you can, a little string that you can use in place of the password. And if you have the ability in Rundeck's access control to use that part of the storage tree, then you can use that token in your scripts or API calls or whatever it might be, and Rundeck will inject it at runtime. So now you can let a larger amount of people do things that normally you couldn't do because you can't give them the password, right? Or you got to do some complicated sudo type thing and set it up, right? So in this way, you can kind of get these, we call these kind of, in this scenario, these BizOps jobs, right? Like, somebody bugs you because they want to know, like, what are the users that we've added to the system, right? Well, here you go, right? I can set up this job for you. It'll give the output. When they log in, they'll just see those jobs they've given access to. They won't be able to edit them or do anything else. They'll just be able to run them and see the output, right? So those are all the kind of common scenarios. Any question about the scenarios? I can talk a little bit more about how everything hangs together and what it's like to create a job. But I just want to pause there and see if any comments or any ideas or about these different types of scenarios for using Rundeck.
I'm just curious about what is your there are new architectural paradigms in which, for instance, like in Amazon Web Service, you don't manage like the performance of the machines, they auto-manage. In other words, if the load increases, they increase themselves. In other words, it senses the load and it increases itself. similarly, like there are new like Kubernetes and Docker, where similar things, happen when the load or whenever there are some changes, they pop up and do sort of like the magic themselves. I wonder if the applications that you control. I'm also curious about the type of environment or company that you are dealing with this. Tool, and what is your perception or ideas with regards to the new architectural paradigms?
Sure. So, it's like, Control Alt Delete doesn't fix everything, right? So, we a large number of especially the Rundeck enterprise customers are moving to the cloud, already in the cloud, and they have, some Kubernetes experiments as well too. And they look at Rundeck for a few ways. Number one is, the auto restart or the auto scaling doesn't really solve all problems, right? There's plenty of times where they need to poke things or look at it or, change configuration themselves. They're very worried about runaway auto scaling. So they want to be able to say, well, is this okay? Should I go in and maybe I'll do auto scale to a bit, but then I want a human to intervene. Also, they have an issue where they don't want everybody just accessing all these different consoles, right? These consoles become just like any other power user tool. There's a million ways to do things in them. Just look at the API for S3, how many different ways it is to save something in a bucket, and you want to have uniform action, and you can't manage the security very well across all these different consoles. So what they'll do is they'll set up Rundeck jobs instead. So, here is how you, request this new provisioning, or here is how you make changes. Here is how you, run diagnostics to understand what's going on. So like for Rundeck and Kubernetes, what it'll do is people use Rundeck to manage the Kubernetes infrastructure itself. Then they'll use a Rundeck plugin to see the pods as they are running in Kubernetes. And then they'll use different jobs to be able to kind of inspect those pods and see, well, what's actually happening right inside those things, and then have things like to be able to kill them or restart them kind of, manually. Also things like failover, like, hey, this isn't working. We got to go back to our failover to a failover system, or rollback. Hey, this isn't working. Someone's got to make a call to go back to a previous version. They'll kind of set up those jobs in Rundeck as well. So it's really the human to tool interaction doesn't go away with those new environments. It's just a different kind of action, right? Like you talk to people who really get deep into AWS, especially like Lambda and those things. It's like, oh, the API says you can request up to 42 of this thing, right? But when I hit the API, it only gives me 16. What's up with that? And how am I going to detect that? And I need to make a decision based on that. So a human's going to want to interact with that. So give them the tools through Rundeck to be able to interact with those systems. So certain classes of problems go away, but it doesn't really solve the need for the operator to get involved in the system. Or you want to say, hey, there's a monitoring tool outside of those systems that's going to see something. How do I have that tool make a call that's going to go and do something via Rundeck in that environment? Yeah, I mean, we're definitely on board with the whole, the dream of a CI loop being able to do all your operations that way. It's a good one. It just, we've yet to see where, that solves all problems.
Thank you.
No problem. And kind of what I was talking about there about Rundeck is, Rundeck knowing about your infrastructure. We've got the idea of nodes, right? That Rundeck wants to go out to different, you can define these locally, but somehow in your environment, someone's going to know about the nodes. If it's VMware, if it's Kubernetes, if it's AWS, right? There's, your infrastructure is coming from somewhere, and you can define, where you want to pull those from, in Rundeck. And then you can define any number of custom attributes that get updated by those things. So maybe EC2 knows about the hosts, and Chef or Ansible knows about the configuration of those hosts, and Nagios or, Prometheus knows about the status of those hosts. As long as you kind of have a common node name to key off of, Rundeck will blend all of those sources for you. And then when you go and execute whatever script or API call or tool or whatever it is, you can parameterize those calls, and Rundeck will automatically, these all become part of the context variables that you can use in those calls, just like you could with the user input, right? So you have the user options, and that, becomes part of the execution context. and you have attributes that come from these different nodes. So that's how, Rundeck, we say Rundeck knows about your infrastructure, which is one of the most difficult parts of kind of, spreading the operational load is people knowing what's running where, especially in the new kind of ephemeral environments. But Rundeck keeps track of that for you. So you can say, this one's got a tag of a load balancer, right? So I can say, hey, all of my load balancers run this status check, right? Or, all of these, my database, my nodes tag database run this library update or some type of yeah, let me look at, I only have about 5 minutes here. So let me look at a job real quick, and then I have to go. Any other questions while I'm doing this?
Yes. When you're writing these, I don't know what you call them, tasks or units of work, jobs.
Yeah, it's a workflow.
Are you dragging things in a web UI? Are you writing things in a text editor?
That's exactly what I'm going to show you now. The answer is yes. So anatomy of a job, you define the different options, right? The options input could be text. It could be, secure, a date picker. You can grab lists from other sources and display them as, drop-down options for people. So you define the user input that you want, and then you would just define the work, right? And here there's different types of steps. I'm calling a plugin. I'm calling other jobs. This is really a job of jobs. But I could add, I could just say, hey, this is the command that I would run, right? If it's the kind of a manual step you would do. You can inline a script. This is like a colorized editor. It would, you could, drop the script in itself and give it all of the, everything you would ever have to feed it the script with. You can say, hey, my scripts exist somewhere else on the network or on the local box. You can refer to another job. And there's all these plugins, right? So, I got a ton installed here, but, hey, I want to have this kind of S3 copy, right? And, and this is what I've done here is I've created these little kind of management widgets. And this could really be any interpreted language under the covers. So to create a plugin, if you don't want to expose the full script, like in the UI, right? To create one of these plugins, you just take any script, often they're Python scripts or Ruby or Bash or something like that. And I just put in a little directory convention. I can parameterize any variables I want in the script. And then I define a little icon for it. There's a little config file that says this is the user input that I want to show. I zip it up, goes into my plugins directory in Rundeck. Now it becomes a little management piece, a really reusable piece that instead of exposing my ugly script to somebody, they feel like it's part of a little management application built into Rundeck. So effectively, I just create these workflows. There's a little notation. If I want to get really complex, there's a little notation, and I can define any kind of custom logic for executing the workflow. Otherwise, there's a whole bunch of workflow strategies that I could employ. I can set up like these job filters, right? So I could add an error handler between a step. I can grab a key value pair from one thing, like, hit this API, get this token, pass it to the script, right? I can change log levels, highlight output. I can make sure I'm masking passwords. I can render, different log output in different formats, all kinds of stuff I can do to make it easier for people to consume or to pass data between steps or to make this stuff work. And then I target it and I say, hey, these are the nodes I want to run it on. I can schedule it. I can notify people on start, on stop if it's gone too long. I can define error handlers. That's basically how it works. And anything I'm doing in the UI here, I can do in text form. So I can do it, and Rundeck has a Git client built into it. So I could sync these with a Git repository. So that way, if developers want to create these, kind of as templates on the fly as part of their definition of done, I can load that into Rundeck, and works just the same as it would with the UI.
Is there a step that would allow for some sort of asynchronous approval? So say I'm a new employee, I'd like a new WordPress blog. There's been one of these set up to automatically create one of those, but before I'm allowed to do it, it has to be approved by, I don't know, my manager. Is there something like a send email and only continue when you get a reply with the text?
Yeah,
yes.
So that's something we're building in. Right now, what people do is they will create the first step to check the ticket system, and they'll say, okay, is this ticket, it's looking for a ticket in the state approved, right? And so what they'll do is they'll use like a ticket system for that. And then when the boss says approved, the ticket will say approved, and they'll tell the user input, hey, look for this, input the ticket ID. And then when the first steps will be only proceed if this ticket has this person, the person who's running the job, their name is associated with it. and the state is approved, right? So there's hacks like that to get around it. But the idea of like having actual explicit approval built into a job, or have that 2 missile key idea, like, hey, this is a big deal. You can run this, but you need to get somebody else to look at this and say, yes, go ahead and run that. It's on the roadmap for probably later this year or early next year.
Thank you.
I shouldn't promise dates. So with that, I unfortunately do have to drop. I wish it was nighttime here, but it's not. So
last question, quick question. So
sure, go ahead.
For DevOps, for sort of like automating DevOps.
Yeah, this works. I mean, a lot of DevOps teams use this. It depends what you do, right? A lot of times it's like, hey, devs love Jenkins, so Jenkins will do all their tasks, and ops loves Rundeck, so Rundeck will do all the ops kind of tasks. And it's often set up by DevOps teams that want to do a lot of deployment, the kind of day two and beyond, service requests or maintenance, incident management, So it's pretty common in these DevOps, more DevOps-oriented organizations to think this way, to think about self-service.
It's open source, correct?
Yeah. So there's an open source version and there's Enterprise. Enterprise has a bunch of different kind of bells and whistles, but if you just go to rundeck.com, you can read all about, and if you're new to Rundeck or if you're already existing Rundeck, it tells you a lot of stuff I was talking about.
Okay.
But also, if you go to the open source, you can find the different open source resources, and you can see a demo here, and you can also contact us, and that gets a salesperson to call you. So yeah,
Thank
so
you.
it's open source. Play around. If you got Enterprise, let me know. All right. Well, hey, I really enjoyed chatting with all of you. Thanks for humoring me in my my Rundeck pitch, and I'll let you guys get back to your evening.